Hello everyone, welcome to my Session 9 teaching memo. I'm doing this a day early because Session 9 actually doesn't end until tonight. Thanksgiving is come and gone and there are only 3 weeks left in the course. Time to put your head down and finish strong. Yes! Condolences for all you Jet fans. While the Pats did not look great, the Jets looked bad. We finally had a decent day up here in Dutchess County yesterday, and Dr. Laura and I got to take a nice walk on the rail trail. I don't think we're going to have too many days like that left. I put my bird feeders out yesterday, so I will be chasing squirrels off my deck for the rest of the winter. And I've been doing that this morning. I just put them out yesterday and the squirrels have discovered them. Haven't seen them all summer. Enough of that. A little housekeeping. I have finally finished giving feedback to everyone on their first draft, at least everyone who has submitted one. You can now post your revised tests to your new group. Now, you need to post your test and give feedback on the same discussion board. I should have done that with the last one as well, but I've been doing it that way for so long, I just haven't gotten around to change it. But post your test and then give feedback on the same discussion board. Now, you have to remember that I'm using the modified discussion board rubric to grade this, so it's not about the quality of your comments, just the fact that you're taking the tests of at least 5 of your classmates. Most groups only have 4 people in them or 3 people in them, so you know you got to go into other groups and take their tests. Giving feedback is optional, but I would suggest it if you want to help your classmates get an A+. So the important thing is that you also have to upload your final revised test. So after you do this discussion board and then make revisions, you'll upload it in session 11 as a Word document, and then I'll grade it. So a lot of people forget that. They think that posting it on this final discussion board counts as submitting it, and it doesn't, because this is not your final draft. At least for some of you it might be, but it isn't. So it was nice to see some of you give some helpful feedback. Many of you are still giving, I loved your targets, I loved your questions, oh, I just loved everything. That's not helpful. If you're going to be a teacher, or if you are a teacher, you know that that's not the kind of feedback you give your kids. At least I've never been in a class where you say, oh, that was wonderful. Yes, that was wonderful. Yes, you did a wonderful job. And the kids are sitting there going, well, how do I get better? You know, and that's what we need to know. You know, using the item writing guidelines that I've shared with you, that are in the discussion board, that are in Kislik's, Is This a Trick Question, or in Chapui et al., Chapter 5, that talk about what are the guidelines for writing, say, multiple choice questions. Well, you have to write it in the form of a question. You can't just leave a blank and have 4 or 5 responses. You can't use all of the above or none of the above, because you need distractors that are going to give you some information about why the kids are messing up, or why the candidates are messing up. What are some misconceptions they have? And if you see a bunch of kids getting the wrong answer, you know you have to go back in and work on that. Also, when you're doing your scenarios, some of you are just giving scenarios that mimic the rubric language. That really isn't a reasoning question. You need to describe the behavior that goes with that rubric language. For instance, you would have to describe how a teacher uses community and cultural assets in her lesson, rather than just stating it. Oh, Mrs. G used cultural and community assets in her lesson. So describe that. So, because I want to see if you understand that. Because if you're going to be taking the EdTPA, you need to understand that. Okay. I want to give a shout out to Chanello, who's in my 22 section, who created several different kinds of reasoning questions. She wrote an inference question, which I'm going to show you right here in the video. And it's like, with which statement would the developers of the EdTPA most likely agreed? And then she gave 4 statements. Now, this isn't something that you can get right from the information from the text of the EdTPA. You have to make an inference here. She also gave another one, which is base your questions to answer 4 and 5 on the scenario described below. This is very similar to what the Educating All Students test, or the EAS, does. So this is exactly the kind of question. They will give you a scenario, and then they'll give you 4 different questions, 3 or 4 different questions on it, where you have to make inferences or judgments or evaluate and use higher order thinking. So this is excellent. Thank you, Chanello, for doing that, and I hope others can learn from this. All right. I also mentioned earlier that in the true-false test on chapter 14, which you took last session, there is what I consider a poorly worded question. So this is the second true-false test in a row. And this is a way, even though we don't do this in our test, but you can do what I call modified true-false tests, where if a question is false, you can have the student write in what would make this correct. Someone did that, and I had to tell them. I said, "Well, modified true/false is not one of the options." So, but this is a way that you can make your true/false even higher order. Use higher order thinking. So, one of the questions, if you got it wrong and you believe it's right, send me an email, and I will give you credit for it if it's the right one. Again, I want to give a shout out to many of you who gave great feedback to your classmates. My feedback is kind of basic. It just goes over item writing guidelines, formatting, if your questions are aligned, if your learning targets are clear and measurable, specific and measurable. But getting suggestions from your classmates, helpful suggestions, is probably better than getting it from me. We only have 3 more sessions, which means that many of you need to catch up. A lot of you have not done the first DEJ yet, or you haven't submitted it. So therefore, you don't have feedback on the DEJ you're going to be doing that's due next week. So that's the unfortunate part. I do not take off credit for being late, but what you do miss out on is my feedback that will help you with the next assignment. So don't forget, keep working on the remaining assignments, like the anchor activities, vocabulary in your own words, final baseline survey, and the 3-part analytic summary, which you should be taking notes as you're doing this test creating process. So make sure you watch my session 10 video as well. For session 9, your double entry journal on Popham's test prep chapter will be due at the end of this session. Make sure you connect to my video, and especially to the other articles on test anxiety and engaging ways to do test prep, because that's important. I mean, most of you are still in schools where you're doing test preparation. Some of it is inappropriate, and now you should know what that is. You should know what the 2 principles are for test prep. So make sure you do that. Make sure you connect to some of those ancillary articles, and especially to my video, because I talk about things that Popham often doesn't talk about. And I also disagree with Popham on one of his 5 test prep strategies that he says is not appropriate, and I think it is in moderation. The bottom line is if your students are prepared, they will be confident. And if they're confident, this in turn alleviates stress. There are also a myriad of pressure-reducing strategies like meditation, breathing, yoga, and other activities you can do that will that make things much less anxiety-producing. Whether you work in a school that does test prep inappropriately or appropriately, you should know what you should be doing. You now should know what you should be doing. And there are acceptable ways to prepare your students for state assessments. This topic is so important because so many veteran and new teachers are not aware of the educational defensibility principle, but there are easy ways, or that there are easy ways to relieve test anxiety. Many of you have commented on that in the sessions we've had before. Oh, these tests are so bad because of anxiety. I used to forget everything and blah, blah, blah. Well, because nobody taught you how to relieve test anxiety. Nobody taught you that, hey, you know this. You're confident. You have a growth mindset. The harder you work, the better you're going to do. So it's so important that you do not pass along your dislike of these tests to your students. It's unfair. I liken it to elementary teachers who dislike math. And would that be right to pass that along to future Einsteins or future mathematicians? No, it wouldn't. And you know it wouldn't. So it's unethical to say the least. Unfortunately, this is most often done unconsciously. So be aware of your attitude. All right, that's it. Make sure you watch my Session 10 assignments video. And I will be back again a week from today.